I'm Cody. I work for a company called CancerIQ. I've been there for going on 2 years now. We are a software development company, and kind of a workflow company. We screen patients, manage patients, and help counsel patients for genetically predisposed cancer. So far, we've screened about 100,000 patients. So about 20,000 of those people were deemed high risk through our screening, and about 1,000 of those people tested positive. So potentially 1,000 lives saved, which is pretty awesome. That's CancerIQ, and myself, I guess, I've been a developer for about 2 years now, so I'm still pretty new at this whole thing.
Hello, my name is Andrew. I work at a company called Albert. We do education technology. We provide assessment for students and then analytics at both the teacher and administrator level so that they can see, how Mary Smith is doing in first period history, or an administrator can see, okay, how are all these teachers using this program that I've purchased for them at my school, and provide different kind of analytics and data at various levels. And then ultimately at the end of the day, students will use our website to study for things like AP tests and GREs and GMATs and all sorts of educational endeavors. We have been using Elixir for about 1.5 years now. We are migrating from a Node.js app, and we've been very, very happy with it.
Hello, hi, my name is Tony with NFI Industries. It's a pretty large transportation company, and we're but a smaller kind of startup group focused on writing software for the brokerage division of that company. Been going for about 2 years now, and just got into production earlier this year, but we haven't saved any lives yet.
I'm Pedro. I work for a company called CityBase. I'm there like more than 1 year. CityBase is a GovTech company. We have a platform for city departments and utility companies. So we offer a platform so those customers, they can create like payment applications, content, and submissions for constituents. So we have Elixir in production since the beginning of last year, and we are moving the most of the new services that we are developing into Elixir. We still have like some big applications in Google as well.
I'm Brian. I work at dscout. I write in Rails and Elixir, and I'm part of the engineering management team, so kind of help us plan out and organize infrastructure and team processes to kind of keep that software evolution manageable. dscout is a platform that helps companies and organizations do remote research. So researchers design studies using our web application, and then our research participants, whom we call scouts, that's why we're dscout, they use mobile apps to kind of provide in-context information or experiential data for the customers about their experiences with the customer's products or services by taking pictures, telling stories, taking videos, answering questions, etc. We use Elixir for about a year and a half, the Elixir application, it's the API that's taking over for the Rails application slowly as we transfer things over. We have a pretty agile workplace and deliver continuously, like 5 to 10 times a day to production. Is it me or is it the mic?
Sorry.
Maybe it's just me.
I don't know. I think it's part of the microphone.
Okay.
It's a new system.
Yeah.
My name is also Brian. I work here at Hashrocket. Been doing that for 7 years. I'm the resident curmudgeon and cynic, and I'm the one who was probably the least excited about Elixir, also the first one to do production work in Elixir. So I'll be bringing that perspective tonight. We've had Elixir in production for I guess about 9 months now, maybe 10, in one of our projects. Yeah, it's going well so far.
Awesome, thank you. So the first question I have for the panel is, and you briefly all talked about your experience with Elixir, but specifically, I want to kind of drive into how you got your stakeholders to accept that you want to do Elixir, how you sold it to them. So Cody, you can start.
For me, it was a little easy because the job I took, in my interview, I was just asked a ton of Elixir questions. So they were very much interested in the language and what it could do. So I took the job essentially to write Elixir. So convincing my stakeholders was accepting the job, I guess.
For us, like I said, we were migrating from a Node.js application, and in particular, we were migrating because RethinkDB, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that database, but the TLDR is that it ran out of money, and so it no longer is being maintained, and also maintaining a very CRUD-like application on a NoSQL database is unpleasant, to say the least. So we were very open to moving to new technologies, so that part was very easy. And then from there, we knew we wanted to move to Postgres, so we were really looking for the best Postgres implementation. And then we found Elixir, and we pretty much sold on a lot of the immutable nature that exists in the language. Our front end uses a lot of immutable JS, and we're very familiar, we're very comfortable with those sorts of design patterns and just ferrying around a lot of immutable data structures. And so it was a very natural sell from that. And then we also sold on the fact that the Erlang VM has been around for 30 years, powers, I think it's like 84% of the world's mobile networks, and I saw that slide the other day that said it was 90% of Cisco's networks are all using Erlang in some capacity. So we really sold a lot on the host VM and the really cool stuff that provides and all the tooling that has just been existing for the last several decades.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't too difficult for us to convince our stakeholders. We're kind of starting from scratch, so we didn't have, a lot of other infrastructure to be concerned with being compatible with, and we had a really close connection to one of the key stakeholders. And a lot of trust because we had experience in the industry from the last, 8+ years, and so we got to kind of pick and choose the technology we wanted to go with, and Elixir had the obvious strong foundation with Erlang, so that was really all it took for us.
When I joined the CityBase, that decision was already made. But I know that the process that took CityBase to get to Elixir was, we still have like a big Rails application, and we were having an increase in demand, and performance was degraded. So they took some proof of concept project to try to analyze options. So they decided to go functional primarily because of payments, and this aspect of immutability was really important. So Elixir was evaluated against Clojure, against Scala, and by performance, and by a closed syntax with Ruby. That was the chosen option.
We had a similar experience coming from a Rails app also. We took also a couple different steps introductory. So a tiny application, and it's more like a tool that acted as a WebSocket proxy server we built so that we could relay messages from the Rails app to the JavaScript application. So that little proxy handling connections was perfect for Elixir in this case in a fault-tolerant way. We didn't want to do that with the Rails app. Then a smaller, like proof of concept little API, like a tiny product idea we built using the full Phoenix stack and a React API, React application on top of the API. After we had proved using these 2 steps that, hey, this thing, we have enough knowledge, it can suit our needs, and then we had all the Rails troubles, the side loading, the caching strategies, the Puma worker killer, using Psychic Enterprise, etc. Like all of that stuff was not optimizing enough in REST. So we picked GraphQL and Elixir as a combo with to transition out of the Rails REST world.
The CTO of the company we built our first Elixir app for came in and he said he wanted Rails, and I said, could we do Elixir? And he said, sure. A little more backstory on that is that they have a monolith Rails app. It's incredibly busy. Like it gets 3,000 simultaneous requests. The things that they've done to Rails to make it scalable like that are pretty atrocious. It's not really recognizable as a Rails app anymore. They've built their own framework within Rails by now over the years. So they were tired of the ops headaches of trying to serve that kind of throughput with Rails. So they were very open to branching out, trying new things, and we hope to do that.
Awesome. So you touched on that a little bit in terms of what you were replacing, or some of you were just like kind of joining the job and it was there. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits that you got from using Elixir, and then what you think you're kind of missing from a previous technology you used to work with? And I know some people here have really interesting backgrounds coming from, it could be Rails, it could be .NET, it could be like lower level languages like system programming. So I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so at CancerIQ, we also had a Rails monolith, surprise. And when I first started, we were moving towards microservices, and they had already created a few other Rails applications to kind of fulfill some roles that the existing monolith application filled, as well as 1 or 2 Node applications. And so I had some, about 6 months of work with the legacy applications. This was also my first engineering job, so I didn't have an extensive amount of Ruby or Rails background. So it's a little bit hard for me to speak against that, like the existing stuff. But we're also a polyglot team, so being able to write a small API in Elixir was not very hard for us. It wasn't a hard sell at all. So one of the, I guess some of the things that I use in Elixir that from my experience has been really worked out really well for me is one, it's incredibly readable, and the documentation is great. But when I started working with Rails, I had a really hard time figuring out, okay, request comes in, what actually happens, right? And then you start digging into the Rails code, and it's very hard to see what's going on. When I first started playing around with Elixir, it's very easy to see the connection come in, and all the plugs kind of do their thing, and finally get to your router and then go to your controller. That was very easy to reason about for me. So that was really nice for me, as a early in my development career to reason about what I was doing. The other thing that Elixir has is that I'm really using a lot is Ecto's embedded schemas. Working with JSON-B is so easy with Ecto compared to what I've seen in Rails. The validations are fantastic. And it's worked out very well for me, considering our APIs, or our software is very, very customizable, so I'm constantly adding new fields. And sometimes I need to rename them, maybe they don't make sense the first time around, so we move very fast, so having that ability is really great.
Yeah, in addition to the explicit nature that Cody mentioned, that's a huge benefit that exists in the ecosystem. We were very pleased with the number of libraries that existed to do the particular things that we needed it to do. That was one of the I forgot to mention this in my previous answer, but like one of the things that we did is we surveyed all the existing libraries that we were using in our previous application, and we made sure that there were at least semi-appropriate analogs in Elixir to make sure that we weren't just going to run into some arbitrary wall that we didn't know about. and it's like, so those all existed. I would say that one thing is that like some of them weren't as great as they could be, but like there's a lot of open source opportunities just because of the youngness of the language to just go in and say like, oh, this isn't quite doing all the things that I want it to do, and you just add those little things and make it a lot better. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that in this language. For us, when we were rolling it out, one of the first things that we did was a data ferrying service. Like we were doing kind of an ETL thing from our NoSQL database to Postgres. And so that was an unfortunately long-lived application. It's still living. I don't want it to live anymore, but it's unfortunately still living. And so one of the things that we needed to do there is we needed to make sure that when something died, like we have like users and we have subjects and we have questions. So like a question can't exist in a relational database before its subject exists because it points to its subject. And so we had to have these cascading kind of data modules. And OTP proved perfect for that because you can link the workers to their previous workers, and if one of those workers dies, then it'll cascade down if you set things up appropriately. That proved to be absolutely perfect for that. As far as things that we're missing, we kind of wish that there were a stronger type system. That's one thing that like I'm a Java guy, so even though Java's type system isn't the best, it still has a lot of guarantees that you don't necessarily get as guarantees in Elixir or in Erlang's type checker. And before a couple weeks ago, the error messages were also really unfortunate for that. I fixed that, by the way. So if anybody wants to check out the dscout library, all the error messages are way improved now and are actually readable. But even with that, the guarantees that you kind of get out of Dialyzer itself are just, they're not the best because it's a success type system, so it just drops a lot of things and it gives up in a lot of cases that other stronger type systems would not, like something in Haskell or Java or C++ or something like that. So I would definitely say that we're missing that aspect of things. However, it hasn't proved to be an issue because Dialyzer still yells at us, and when it yells at us, it is right 100% of the time. So yeah.
Can you also mention what language you come from, like what frameworks? I know some of you have a lot of stuff, but just try to mention like your favorite two, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, my previous experience in the industry was with in a .NET shop. So when we had a chance to make some changes, I think the main attraction was a functional language with immutable data types. Just simply, when using an object-oriented language, the fact that state is implied in everything you're doing just, I think, makes it hard to break things apart cleanly. Like state is the devil when it comes to systems. That's why when something's broken, you turn it off and turn it back on again to take control of the state of that thing. So for a language that forces you to be so much more explicit about managing state was a big pull. And then, of course, like the OTP seemed like a nice fundamental, I should say the actor model generally seemed like a nice fundamental building block for having the same guarantees, right? Protected state and interacting only with messages seemed like a very nice, clean building block to build any system you would want on. So I was interested in Clojure as well for those reasons, but Elixir had OTP too. So. As for what we're missing, coming from a .NET shop, I felt like we were kind of in a bubble, right? As far as the technologies we were using, it's kind of, a lot of it is prescribed by the Microsoft stack, and so I wasn't really venturing out into the greater world. That's part of what I'm missing too. Like it's also kind of convenient when all of those things are prescribed for you. You have less decisions to make. That can be a little painful, but of course I'd rather have the control in the end.
On top of a lot of good things that we we heard so far. One thing that for me is really important, and Elixir gives you, and I forgot to mention, is that one of the reasons that we also were looking for something different at CityBase was that the Rails application was a big monolith, and we would like to go to a more of breaking down this in services. And Elixir has that concept since day one with umbrella projects, with the concept of application, with the concept of isolation. So you don't need to have the overhead of spreading out like microservices across many services and orchestrate everything, but you can have those services being added in the umbrella over time. So you kind of have the both world good parts. Functional programming I was a group developer, PHP developer prior. So having the functional programming in comparison with the object-oriented programming is a lot of things. It's a lot of, I don't see myself going back to object-oriented programming again. So my mind is already shifted. So the way that I'm thinking in solving a problem has that immutable piece. That will for sure differ from person to person because of the background, but we see a lot of benefits in OTP for sure, Phoenix on top of Rails for sure, Acto, there is no comparison, like the way that Acto is structured with the 4 pillars, comparison with Active Record, there is no comparison. So a lot of things are, and AppSync for GraphQL is fantastic. So there is a lot of like important things that make a really good decision for us.
Was there anything that's missing?
Developers. but in my prior company, we were like most of our applications were Ruby. We had Elixir, and we also had like a hard time to find developers. So I don't see too much difference trying to hire good Ruby developers and hire good Elixir developers. You can hire developers, yeah, but we at least at CityBase, we try to set the bar high in terms of who we are hiring. So hiring good people is really hard, and I'd say that's everywhere.
As I said before, the GraphQL change was something we conceived as a way to solve the.
Can you maybe hold it a little bit like this? Yeah.
A suite of problems that I mentioned, from using a worker killer to Sidekick to which Sidekick is great. To having extensive side loading on the REST endpoints where we were loading 5 and 6 levels of parent and child and grandchild, etc., just to save network requests. But we also then, the mobile apps were having to load tons of data they didn't even need, so we would have to mangle REST to get that right. Let's leave that topic alone. But then the GC problems with Ruby, I love Ruby and Rails. I come from Ruby and Rails, and I love Active Record. I'll admit it. I love all that stuff. The machine just doesn't. It's really hard, and over time doesn't either, right? I love writing. Yeah, let's leave that alone too. But so we wanted the best of a lot of worlds. I think that we were already behaving in a service-oriented fashion. We didn't have microservices. I've done that before, and it's a tough thing to do too. But having these services in charge and kicking them off with Sidekick was something we already do. OTP lets us do that within the infrastructure. So we had already taken steps within the Rails app to behave in a way that I think Elixir let us realize in a different way. The pain points, I suppose, like Andrew, I think we found lots of libraries were either missing or underdeveloped. But it's a young community, that's to be expected. Like you said, either revise the ones you find, help them out, make them better, or just write your own. It's remarkably fast to build something in Elixir. It's surprising. When you first see it, you think, well, there's a lot of strangeness here with the pipes and the width and the pattern matching. there's so much that just looks strange to me in immutability. How can that even work? But you can get those under your belt pretty fast, I think, and then write those libraries yourself is what we did. The other thing I would mention is, people are gonna laugh at me, but I really like the Rails console and pry. Maybe that's childish, but I love those things. It helps me do my work, and I love RSpec too. I don't have any of those things to the same extent in our use of Elixir, and I sometimes miss those things. I use io.inspect all the time, but it's not the same.
It's not quite the same. Yeah, I dovetail on a lot of that stuff. I also had come to the point where I was over data hiding in OO. Like, to me, private data is just a pain in my ass. So the fact that all of the data is everywhere visible, and you can get most of the information that you need by just printing out whatever structure you're dealing with at the moment. You don't have to run methods, and you need an interactive situation in order to explore what's going on. So that's a fun thing to use about an immutable data structure oriented language like Elixir. Pros that we found with it are, we stood up this app on a Mealy Mouse. I think it's got 4 gigs of RAM, their production box, and they've never had any performance issues with it. That's just awesome. We never have to think about scaling at all, so that's nice. Startup time of the app and development, test run time is all super great. The fact that you can do concurrency really easily is a blessing and a curse, I would say, because we were able to not have any kind of background job processing and do all kinds of things asynchronously, and that's great until you need to get off the beaten path. I mean, OTP is awesome if you really do just want to let it die, but maybe you want to hear what its last words were before it slips into the abyss. Then you're going to have to write a few layers of gen servers to keep track of those error messages and shuttle those around, which was challenging, but with a little practice and experience, it's achievable, which I don't think you could say that about forking the Ruby VM. That's not really a thing that you should do to do background tests. So another thing that was lacking, so some of the difficulties around wrapping my head around the concurrency model, for me, I feel like the concurrency model is challenging. I feel like it takes some of the hardest concurrency problems and makes them the foremost thing, like tracking PIDs and stuff. It feels like a challenging model. Once I got used to it, it felt like a powerful and challenging model, but it's still a challenging concurrency model for me. And then another thing is testing. I miss mocks. I miss being able to assert how many times something was called and from what, and those kinds of things are not possible. You work around it, and so in a unit context, often working without mocks is beneficial. But when we got to end-to-end testing, we need to integrate with 3 or 4 foreign REST APIs, and we have to simulate how they're going to respond because those developers are always changing them. The kinds of tooling that we had to build to spin up fake web servers that would come back with the data we expected so that we could have integration end-to-end tests, that became a lot to manage, which I feel like is just probably a spot where the community could use some growth, and it sounds like I should probably try to help with that.
Have you seen Mech?
I haven't. We use Bypass.
It's from Plataforma Tech, so they have their own mock library, but it's you make a behavior to represent whatever service that you're doing, and then you can swap it out in your tests. There's a whole article from the Plataforma Tech blog about the methodology behind it, and I think Jose wrote it.
Yeah, we need to mock at the HTTP response level. So
interesting.
We want to have we want to make a request and then assert about what we said, insert conditions, and assert about what came back.
You can still do that depending on where you set your layer, because if the behavior is such that it's on the other side of the HTTP boundary, then the thing that I'm getting back on the other side of from invoking a method on that boundary is the HTTP response. Then you can put whatever you want right there and get the best of all the worlds.
Facade or proxy class module.
Sweet.
At CityBase, we have a lot of integration with city departments, APIs and stuff, and we use Mox for that, and it works pretty fine.
Mox, that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Sorry.
MLX, yeah.
Yeah, Mox, yeah.
Yeah, we wound up we're coming up with something that worked using Bypass, which spins up an actual web server, so you can make requests to it and give it canned responses, and all of that worked. It was just a lot more effort than I'm used to putting into that when you have something like WebMock. So it seems like it's part. Maybe Mox would have been easier than this, but it seemed like it was more work than I was expecting to have to put in coming from Rails.
Yeah, and Mox is not just for web calls, it's for anything that you want to simulate the behavior, you can do it. So it's not specific for external calls, HTTP or WebSockets.
And it's a very common pattern to just wrap something in an internal service and then just like shove a behavior in front of it, and then that way you can just sub it out in your tests if it's doing anything remotely complicated.
Which is sort of classic OO thinking, but moved into, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like mock as a verb versus mock as a noun, or that might be backwards, but there's an entire methodology around it.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about pitfalls. I want to drill a little bit into that and see if you had some pitfalls, how did you solve them? Where did you get help? And then would you have done anything different? Like looking back, would you change anything in how you structured your app to try to solve those issues? And it could also be like, well, I wouldn't use Elixir for this problem. I'll use something else.
Yeah, that's. I didn't run into too many issues with Elixir, and like I said, we do microservices. So the Elixir application I built and the one I'm building now, I mean, the behavior is pretty limited. What it does is pretty limited, and that helps a lot, right? I think the biggest thing that I ran into was deployment, which I think we're going to talk about soon. But we use Kubernetes, CancerIQ, and the deployment story wasn't, going very well at that point in time. I finally figured it out. I'm using Distillery to build releases and Docker container, and using Replace OS for that. Luckily, there was a few people doing that at the time that I could find blog posts about. So those people really helped me out because I was pretty stuck. But the Elixir forum and the Slack channels are absolutely wonderful. Everybody's super responsive. I really appreciate that as a young developer. So that's really helped me a ton. I love Elixir for how easy it is to set up things, and that's really the golden thing for me. So I definitely wouldn't choose anything else for what I did.
Yeah, for us, we flirted a little bit with a library called eSpec, which is kind of similar to Rails RSpec, and it works very similarly, and that wound up being a lot of effort to rip back. Let's just say that. We eventually just kind of had to bite the bullet. Our tests they were taking like 15 minutes to run like 1,500 tests or something like that, which was just absolutely inexcusable. Then we went back to XUnit because we realized that the thing that we thought that it was missing, it was actually not missing. We just weren't doing it right. And then our tests went down to about 30 seconds or so. So that was definitely a thing that was. I wish that we had not done that. But the other thing, somebody mentioned umbrella apps. We've actually not had the best experience with umbrella apps. Like they're a wonderful concept in idea. We just in the particular way that we implemented our application, we did not have the strongest lines between them, and so things were kind of just calling code back and forth between the applications. And had we separated things out into separate applications at the beginning and separate repositories entirely, we would have been able to hook into the ecosystem the same thing, because you could just pull in one of those applications one of those repositories as an application, and then start it as though it were within your normal code base. But we would have had the ability to, for example, open source things without having to tease out internals, and it would have just been nice had we known that we wanted to do that from the beginning. So I would definitely recommend, if you have no Elixir code written to just consider that world, because it really isn't that bad.
Yeah, our major pain point has also been deployment. And I guess especially around configuration in a production deployment scenario, right? I guess we kept running into surprises with different behavior in production because we didn't understand that a certain piece of configuration was going to be compiled into the release package. You know, like so we were using distillery with replace OS bars. Things should be great, but then we put that into a module variable that we use in the module, and that module variable gets set at build time, right? So we ran into that surprise a few times when going to prod. And then I guess type checking as well. Like I want to work in a dynamically typed language, but I want to be able to opt in to type checking for things like the messages that we're passing for the important pieces, and that has been a struggle to really get. You know, I can't make dialyzer fail easily enough, right? I can muck with if the function is complex enough or has a diverse input or output. I can totally destroy the shape of the data structure and not make dialyzer fail. So, not really getting enough support from dialyzer in the areas that we wanted, and. Yeah, I guess the tooling around moving release packages around, you know, we've been using eDeliver, you know, kind of a sidecar to distillery that will use distillery to build the packages and build them on a server. You know, if you're developing on Mac OS, you do the build in a remote Linux server, get the release package, move it to your production server. eDeliver is trying to help with that, but that involves building every time we want to do a deployment. So we're kind of having to do our own tooling now to just use that one release package everywhere, right, and move that around more easily. And I guess we could be getting more help from tooling to do that for us, right? But we have to build it ourselves now.
It seems that deployment is always the pain point, and for us it's quite the same. And I'd say that for CityBase. Because of the history of having Ruby deployments and Ruby applications, and the deployment in Ruby applications are totally different. There is no concept of release, just like copy files, and that's it. So, and depending for sure, like who is doing the deployment, if you have like a specific team that handles that for any reason, like security or like isolation or whatever, if that team is not like prepared to understand that there is other ways to deploy code, that would be a problem, and was for us. We are changing this over time, but has like a ramp up time for who is managing deployment, who is setting up infrastructure, to understand like the concept of deployments in Elixir or Erlang. There is no right and wrong. It's just they are different and they have like pros and cons. I would say that I mentioned that we did a POC application for evaluate different technologies and compare. I'd say that I would do different in a way that I would enforce the POC piece in the deployment side. Development is always simpler, but you want to put in production and you want to see like the options that we have, that you have, and the options that you have in terms of people to manage that deployment process. I'd say that I would enforce much more that aspect, because when things need to be on production, you need to understand the decision that you made was the proper one based on what you have. Other pitfall, when I joined the team, the project they have in Elixir was using ISPEC. I came to CityBase, I was already developing in Elixir in my prior company, and I really don't like ISPEC. It's totally off rail, no pun intended. So that was a pitfall that I'd say that they chose ISPEC to start as a test because of the similarity with the Rails application that they had. The other pitfall that means like upside down is the syntax. From Ruby, it's really easy to be to understand Elixir because the syntax sometimes is similar, but that's a pitfall because it seems that, oh, I got this, and there is so many other stuff specific to Elixir, specific to actor model, to OTP, to releases, that they are outside the syntax and make you think that, oh, I got this, but in reality, you didn't. So.
I think the pain points for us have been more about process, moving from one API that serves up all of the application's resources to another one over time involves, and as one goes down, the other one goes up. It requires a lot of process care. The Adopting Elixir book mentioned something called Terraform, which maybe could have helped with that, I think. Of course, it's maybe not a good time now, but I think that's not a pain point of Elixir as much as the challenge of the organization and the challenge of rewriting something you already had for really great reasons, but it's something to, I think, if other people are thinking of that, think it may be along the lines of what you're talking about with you need to map out ahead of time with your proof of concept, your deployment strategy. You probably need to map out your transferring functionality over strategies too, and maybe have some way of putting safety in place around the changes when things get suddenly mapped over, when they get transferred over, or when you start relying on one more than the other. I think that's more of a learning of the adopting of Elixir too, even though it's not Elixir's specific fault.
So when you mention Terraform, you mean the Hex package for migrating APIs, right?
Yeah.
Because there's another Terraform, not to be confused with.
No, not that one.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that's mentioned in the book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we brought down our staging server, probably never our production server, but with logging. We wrote I'm not the only one, fill up the entire hard drive.
Show of hands, how many people have
Okay, all right. So your logger starts saying that the process crashed, and then you have too much of an aggressive restart on your supervisor, and so then you actually are flushing like gigabytes super fast to the hard drive of just like, I'm gonna restart this, I'm gonna restart this, I'm gonna restart this, and it's never gonna restart because it's misconfigured. So that was frustrating. That was a frustrating problem that we ended up just getting like, before we could figure out how to get our thrashing under control, we actually figured out how to get log rotation going. So we're still pumping all this stuff to the hard drive, but it was deleting itself before it filled it up. So that was a problem. I would say like configuring in production was also really hard. I feel like there's too many ways to do it, and many of them are false dead ends, like this replacing vars and build time stuff with edeliver. We went through all of that. We wound up pretty early on. I got frustrated and discovered that if I just did everything with a separate linked sysconfig in Erlang for every server, then it would just work all the time. The downside is you have to write Erlang tuples, which feel a little weird if you're used to writing your tuples in Elixir for your config. But that's the thing that we found that just worked, trademark. So there's just too many options, and many of them don't work, or don't work well all the way through for configuring your production environments. Another thing that is testament, I think, to my noobishness is return type conventions. So we did not have dialyzer, and anytime I wrote a function more than a few months ago, I had to remember, and now I'm gonna call it, I had to remember, was I in like a OK tuple mood, or was I feeling more like nil if it's not there? Or was this really early on and I like threw an exception? Or like where, I know that that's probably a big faux pas now, but still, like if something's not there, is it nil? Or is it error in a string and isn't there in a tuple? So having a strong convention around that on your team would be something to have, something good to have early on, like good agreements or some good convention. Probably dialyzer can help with that, but that was a bit of a mess for a while.
To the logging point, there's a really good blog article from one of the guys. I think he works at Heroku. He's really big in the Erlang community. Fred, I'm gonna totally butcher his last name. He's French, and I don't speak French, but Herbert, something like that. Yes, that guy. He's excellent. I recommend all of his writings, but he has one called, it's like going down the logging rabbit hole, Logplex rabbit hole or something. And it's an excellent talk about a lot of the limitations of the previous Erlang logger before they came out with Logger like the beer, which is the library that Elixir's logger is modeled after. So that'll give you a lot of the background into why Elixir's logger is the way that it is. And it's to solve all the problems that he outlined in that blog post.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about deployment strategy. So what is your deployment strategy? And let me see what else I wanted to ask about that. Do you take advantage of hot code swapping? If you do, why? If you don't have to explain, but you can say that you tried it or you didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't do any hot code swapping. My Elixir app, or our Elixir app, I'm the only developer, by the way, so writing Elixir, is completely stateless, which works really great on Kubernetes. Don't get to use all the fun Elixir stuff, but there's no point in hot code swapping there. I have Kubernetes for that. And we do use GitLab CI. We're using GitLab CI to build our containers, Docker, multi-stage build. So we build a release, replace OS bars, really helps out there. Kubernetes managing our secrets, inject some environmental variables into the pod when it's launched. I haven't had really any issues with configuration there once I figured it out. But like I said, the application doesn't do a lot. Build a release, deploy it to Google Container Registry, and update the images. It rolls out gradually. Yeah, that's the story. I thought I was going to be the only person running on Kubernetes, but Albert, I will let you know what they're doing.
Yeah, ours is a very similar story. We use Kubernetes. We do literally all the things that he just said. We like Kubernetes a lot, and it does a lot of the stuff that Erlang kind of predated Kubernetes by a lot, and like it solves a lot of the same kind of problems. And a lot of people are sort of discussing they're theorizing that potentially Erlang's niceties in combination with Kubernetes, like one of them is kind of unnecessary in that, but we found that it works very nicely. Our application is largely stateless, which is one reason that we don't use hot code swapping. If we had to like update a lot of state, then we would definitely consider it. And for what I understand, the story around that is pretty good these days.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at our deployment strategy before, distillery, but no containerization as of yet. Just moving apps to DigitalOcean droplets with provisioning with Ansible. And like I said, eDeliver to move our releases, but we're in the process of taking that over and basically relying on GitHub releases to manage the release packages and move them to the servers with Ansible. Yeah, that's it.
So we do clean deploys, releases with Distillery. We don't do hot code swap yet. We use Jenkins just to script the release process, build the AMI, use the AMIs, AWS. Another thing that we use Conform for configuration. So Conform is from Bitwalker. He's the guy that is behind some changes for the deployment process in Elixir. So Conform does the environment configuration setup, and in combination with, let's say, Salt, that you can have secrets encrypted somewhere. So everything depends, like how sensitive is the configuration that you have, how many environments, if you have QA, staging, UAT, production, all that kind of stuff. will make you go to one direction or to another direction. So, but today we are doing that way. We are also trying out Docker to see the pros and cons of everything. We are open to everything that can be useful to us. Of course, we know the price that has to be paid if you decide to go Docker. Our application has a lot of state in place. So if we decide to go with Docker, we need to see if we can apply to only specific services that we have, not all services that we have. So that is an option as well.
We use Heroku, so we don't have some of the complexities you guys have talked about. I mean, I know there are trade-offs, of course. It hasn't been necessary yet to move to a different strategy. The environment variables are set in Heroku, and we use a sort of .env-like strategy to get a hold of them in the application. And then mix phx.server.
My question to you there is, what happens when your app restarts to all your OTP servers that are running around?
When it restarts? Well,
Because Heroku restarts it all the time, like regularly.
it restarts it.
All of your, restart the server.
Like arbitrarily?
It has like, I think, scheduled.
Yeah, I think it's like once a day or once every like couple of days or something like that.
Yeah, so you have like a lot of, well, yeah, like you have a lot of cache or something like that in an OTP server, then it will just basically die and you'll have to rebuild it. So there's like a cost there, and like in terms of, I guess, CPU and memory spikes.
Well, we're redeploying 5 to 10 times a day, so that's kind of built into the model that it's built in a way that can be redeployed that commonly. Yeah, when you merge code to master, it redeploys to production. So that has to be that way, right? We don't have ops people. It's no ops environment. Heroku pipeline is the ops team. I mean, we have people who have some expertise in this area, but we're consciously choosing to be no opsy, to be agile in that way.
We do e-deliver into a cloud service computer that I don't know anything about because the ops guy set it up for us at the company we were consulting. Yeah, we use sysconfig, like I said. We did have quite a long and glorious run of hot deploys, which was nice, because we don't have any containerization. We just have one machine sitting there. So, you know, with Kubernetes, you can get another one warm and then siphon the traffic off to the new one as you phase out the old one. We don't have that, so when ours goes down, there's just no production service until the new one reboots. So hot deploy was ideal, and we got it working. It was working well, and at some point, I foolishly pulled up the console in production and saw that there were like tons of processes that were sitting there thrashing and that weren't restarting by the automatic rel up that's generated by e-deliver. And so I spent some time trying to figure that out, you know, manually restarting things. And it seemed to get worse and worse over time. So I left a bad taste in my mouth, mostly because I have no idea what's going on with rel ups. It magically worked, and then like magic, it just faded away again. It's like the clock struck midnight. All of my pumpkins turned back into Cheerios, so I lost my glorious hot code swapping, which I actually spoke at this meetup about how to make it work, and now I have to eat a little crow because we gave up, and then by the end of the project, we were just bringing down production for 2 seconds a couple times a day as we did deploys. I'm not super proud of that, but I feel like the community and the internet world is very good at, you know, spinning up containers and siphoning off stuff because that works for every technology, blue-green deploys or whatever. And if I had to do over again, I probably would have tried to set up something like that, or found somebody who really knew what a rel-up was to help me understand that.
Question to the audience: does anybody here know what a rel-up is? Does anybody know what a rel-up is? Okay. Oh. Release upgrade.
Yeah.
Now you know.
Now I know.
So maybe you two can talk about it later. The next question is about some of the tooling that you guys use, not necessarily for deployment, but in general. Are there any must-have hex packages you really every project should have this, or any web project should have it, or something like this? And I'll combine it with the second one, which is, have you published any hex packages yourself? Something that you want to tell the audience about?
So something you didn't mention is editor support, and getting with Alchemist is awesome. Also, Emacs with also Alchemist is pretty awesome. So both of those really help. As far as hex packages, pretty bare. I actually do use Bypass, which I found very helpful. I wasn't familiar with Mox, I've heard of it. Another thing that's really useful for just the day-to-day is Mixed Test Watch. It's just a test watcher. I really find that really helpful. Test runs so fast that you're not, using Spring to launch up your Rails application and waiting forever. That's about it. Also, Bleacher Report has a pretty nice JSON logger since we use Stackdriver. We do JSON logs, which is really helpful. Although it's not quite set up in a way that Stackdriver works, so I've had to do some finagling there. So if I am going to produce a hex package, that might be the first one.
Yeah, for us, Ecto drives everything. Ecto is amazing. Ecto is the backbone of our application. We could not do most of the things that we do in our application if Ecto were not designed in the way that it is designed. Just so a quick aside. So Ecto produces a query that is then sent as a message to the Postgres broker or bouncer pool or whatever they call it. And so before it gets sent there, you can manipulate it. And so you can go in and you can rewrite parts of the query AST that are being emitted, and it is so powerful if you need to do any crazy gymnastics like that. We unfortunately do, but it gives us the escape hatches to do all of that in some really disgusting and horrible ways that nobody should ever have to deal with in real life, besides the people that wrote that library. But it is wonderful, and I have never used a database abstraction layer that is as good as that one. Full, completely underscored support for that. Some really useful non-Elixir things that we use. PG Hero is written by one of the Instacart people, and it just gives you really useful stuff about your Postgres instance, and it tells you these are really slow queries, or I'm going to suggest that you pop in this index or something like that. So that's been independently useful outside of this. Within the Elixir world, let's see, other things that we've been using. We wrote a library called Optimal, which lets you do keyword list validation. It's pretty nice. You can say that something is Boolean, or something is a string, or something takes in these enumerable values, and then a lot of busy work that you have to do at the boundaries of some of your DSL layers. You can just throw a schema there, and then it'll mail at you if you don't do it right. We also wrote a thing called Spandex, which is a tracer library. Actually, one of the other Elixir developers at our company wrote that, and so you can send traces to Datadog. And I don't know if it's working yet, but the idea was to also be able to send it to Zipkin or any of the other equivalent services. And then we have pushed a whole bunch of PRs just kind of through the world. We pushed some stuff to Ecto, we pushed some stuff to Elixir, we pushed some stuff to, I've recently done some work on the JSON schema library in Elixir. So that's now pretty current, so you can use all the JSON schema niceties. I mentioned before, I fixed up some of the dialyzer error messages. There's really just a dearth of opportunities to contribute in the world. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, even though the libraries themselves are extraordinarily high quality in a lot of cases. There's just stuff that you need in your particular application that they haven't thought of. And the community is very, very, like they're very amenable to people coming in and doing drive-by PRs.
Yeah, as far as text packages that we use kind of on an everyday basis, very test-oriented, so Faker for generating fake data, and private to, if you want to be able to access private functions from your tests, a macro to help expose those. Maybe your testing philosophy doesn't agree with that, that's fine, but it has been a useful tool. We've gotten a lot of leverage out of Mix template and Mix generator, so we are also building microservices and we keep making more and more. So this has been pretty good for us having, once we've established the way we want our Elixir projects to look, right, we get to spin that up very quickly with a base project template and then hierarchical project templates for the different kinds of services we might want to bring up. So being able to get a new Elixir project up that passes our kind of baseline testing really quickly has been helped a lot by that Mix template, Mix generator. And then I guess maybe if you learned Elixir through the book, the Observer GUI, and that was nice, but we're running in a headless environment, so we just found out about the Observer CLI, right? So you can see a lot of details about your supervision tree and process statistics in a terminal environment, in a remote environment like that is pretty powerful. That's all I got.
Have you seen WASRiver?
No.
WASRiver is from Square Enix, the guys who made Final Fantasy and all those fun games. They have a web observer, so WASRiver, and you just serve it on a web page and you just throw it on your board and you can just do what you would there, and serve behind like a tunnel and you're good.
I could split this in two categories. One is development related, like Plug, Guardian, Acto for sure. Acto is the most massive. It's AppSync for GraphQL is really great. Of course, Phoenix. For the other side of code quality, I'd say Xcode for test coverage, Credo, Xdoc, Elixir. So those are tools that we use, and we keep a kind of like a standard for every service, and we try to document everything, we try to type spec everything, we try to have linked in everything. So that way is easy for people that are joining the team to understand and have like a overall like same code style.
Yeah, ours is much less well developed, and I think a lot of your libraries are, but it's Phoenix, Ecto, and Absinthe are our core, because at its heart, it's an API serving up domain data. So I think things like Credo and XUnit, of course, I mean, they're things you can't do without. Kind of like in the Ruby world, that the basic gem file always has a certain half a dozen things that like everybody's going to use for. So I think I'd like to learn some of those things you're talking about. That sounds like really exciting ways to improve code quality and kind of maintain a baseline. So that's exciting to hear about.
We switched from Alchemist to the Elixir language server because Alchemist was like timing out from my VM when I was trying to do method lookups on a fairly small project. So that was frustrating, and language server is pretty consistently better than Alchemist in my experience so far. So that's been cool. We of course use auto formatting on write with Neo format and Mix format, which keeps things nice and consistent. Yeah, and then as far as the contributions that have come out of this project, I don't know if you guys have used Wallaby. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. If you come from Capybara or any other, so it's an integration test, like remote control browser to user site tool, and it's really well designed. And so our biggest contribution back was we added the Chrome driver support was new, and we added console logs. So if you're running a test and you have some JavaScript that executes, and you put console logs in your JavaScript, then you'll see the output in your test output from your Elixir tests. Now, so that was fun. That was a cool piece of community interaction. Those are nice people on the Wallaby team.
I have one more question. It's a multi-part question. It's about hiring. So, has it been easy or hard for you to hire? I know that CityBase has answered that already. So that's for devs and consultants if you've used consultancy. And then what experience level do you find people come in with? Like, do they like come in at a senior level? Do they like know about all the tooling and all the things, how to build OTP apps? Or do they just know the syntax, or they don't know anything at all? You have to teach them. And then, are you currently hiring? And if you do, where can people find out more?
So CancerIQ is a polyglot team, so we wouldn't necessarily hire only Elixir developer. I also write Ruby and JS most days. I think we've had trouble hiring in general. I'm sure there's just a lot of engineers in general in the industry, so we are absolutely hiring. We're hiring for DevOps and security. We're hiring from junior to senior level engineers. I would love for someone to come on and teach me more about Elixir that I don't know. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, for us, we actually haven't hired any backend engineers explicitly since we've adopted Elixir. But what we have had happen is that, so when we first started adopting Elixir, it was me and one other developer, and we were kind of like spearheading the initial part of the application. And then we've had to onboard 3 separate other developers at various points. And basically, as people have gotten brought on, we've noticed inefficiencies in our tooling, and we've just had to go and fix that. And like, when people have questions, we try and eliminate the source of that question. Is kind of the way that we've been approaching things. But yeah, we actually are not hiring at the moment for technical positions, but we are hiring for some non-technical positions. If you know anybody that is an educator that wants to do anything around curriculum development, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say hiring has been particularly easy or hard for us, kind of in the middle. We got plenty of response. I guess one of the things when we chose Elixir was we're hoping we would, the kind of person interested in an Elixir job is going to be a higher caliber of developer, and I think that did prove true. Like on average, we saw some pretty high quality applicants, and we are still hiring now. We're kind of closing out this hiring round and finishing up one last spot, but that's not finalized yet, and we're kind of always looking for interested applicants. So you can look at jobs.relaytms.com. We'll put that, publish that somewhere in case you forget it immediately. What else was there?
I think you answered everything.
Yeah.
We'll publish every link that you have in the comments, so feel free to do it yourself or send it to me later. And I'll put it out.
Yeah, for sure, CityBase is hiring. In terms of how hard it is to hire Elixir developers, from my experience, is same as hiring Ruby developers, hiring React developers, something that we are also hiring. So we have positions open. If you go to citybase.com/careers, there are positions for senior Elixir developer and like an intermediate level Elixir developer as well. In terms of what level of developers that are coming to us, that varies a lot. There are people that they are senior in a specific language, but they are like brand new or junior in Elixir. So everything depends. Like if you are senior in Clojure and learning Elixir, oh, this is great because there's a lot of functional programming that you know. But if you are senioring, say, Java and .NET, maybe that's not that great. So it depends.
We're not hiring, but in our experiences hiring this last year, a couple engineers, we largely look for a thoughtful and productive Ruby engineers that demonstrated a major interest in learning more and broadening their knowledge base. That was, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's what we're always looking for in great engineers anyway. And so I think that will be our pattern going forward too. I mean, yeah, but we're not hiring yet.
We're totes hiring, right, Chris? This is a fun place to work. We haven't hired anybody explicitly in Elixir. We haven't really had the opportunity. I don't think we've had any candidates just for that. So we would, and at this point, our project load is 100% React, and then probably 20% of the backends are Elixir, and the rest are Rails at this point. But we do see a trend more towards Elixir finally. So if you want to work with us and you know Rails, then you can follow us from Rails to Elixir, come along with us. And if you already know Elixir and you want to work with us, you can teach us so we can do a good job as we transition. That'd be awesome.
Cool, thank you. So let's give one round of applause for the